Thurgood Marshall, judge, civil rights activist, Supreme Court justice, and lawyer. Thurgood Marshall was born in Baltimore, Maryland on July 2, 1908 to William and Norma Marshall. Thurgood rose from a segregated childhood to the highest seat in the land. Although he attended Baltimore's racially segregated public schools, his parents instilled in him the importance of higher education. Legend has it that Thurgood was made to memorize sections of the U.S. Constitution when he got in trouble in school, only to find years later that his punishment would soon be to his advantage. In 1929, he married University of Pennsylvania student Vivienne Bury. And just a short year later, he graduated from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania with honors. Thurgood Marshall then attended Howard University Law School in Washington, D.C., where he was top of his class. Passing the bar exam in 1933, Marshall practiced in Baltimore until 1938. He also served as counsel for the Baltimore branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as NAACP. Thurgood believed in the Constitution and did everything in his power to create equalness. He felt the Constitution would be a tool that would make black people equal to whites in this country. 1935 was a turning point for Thurgood. While serving in the NAACP, he won the Murray v. Pearson case. Thurgood fought for Murray as he was denied admission to law school because of his race. Thurgood Marshall continued to serve for the NAACP while moving up in rank. 20 years later, Thurgood then marries Cecilia Marshall and has two children, Thurgood Marshall Jr. in 1956 and John Marshall in 1959. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy appointed him to the Court of Appeals, and Thurgood defends civil rights demonstrators, winning the Supreme Circuit Court victory in Gardner v. Louisiana. President Lyndon B. Johnson then appoints him Solicitor General in 1965, and by now, Thurgood has already won 14 out of the 19 cases for the government. While still in presidency, Lyndon Johnson nominates Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court, stating that it is the right thing to do, the right time to do it, the right man, and the right place.
Historians will note this hour at the White House. In a Rose Garden ceremony, a 58-year-old great-grandson of a slave is nominated by President Johnson to be a Supreme Court justice. He is Solicitor General Thurgood Marshall, acknowledged the best-known Negro lawyer of the century. The president also calls his nominee best qualified.
I have just talked to the Chief Justice and informed him that I shall send to the Senate this afternoon the nomination of Mr. Thurgood Marshall, Solicitor General, to the position of Associate Justice Supreme Court, made vacant by the resignation of Justice Tom C. Clark of Texas.
Throughout his time in office, Thurgood was able to argue 32 cases before the Supreme Court, more than anyone else in history. He also had the honor of winning 29 of them. Some of these cases included Smith v. Allwright, which invalidated the so-called white primary in 1944, Shelley v. Kramer, which prohibited state courts from enforcing racially restrictive real estate covenants in 1948, and Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, which invalidated state-enforced racial segregation in public schools in 1954. Thurgood Marshall fought to end legal segregation and was successful at it. In 1987, Thurgood Marshall gives his name to establish the Thurgood Marshall Scholarship Fund to benefit public historically black colleges and universities. In 1991, Thurgood Marshall retires at the age of 83. And just a short year later, Thurgood Marshall passed away on January 24th, 1993, in Maryland. In conclusion, Thurgood Marshall served by the people and for the people. He was concerned for change, and change he made.